Our next guest is Mayor Michael Hancock of Denver, Colorado. He is serving his third term as mayor and is the second African American to hold the position. During his time in office, he has prioritized public safety, housing, and economic recovery. My colleague Julia Manchester spoke to him a short while ago.
Mayor Hancock, thank you so much for joining us today for this summit. One of the topics that I've been thinking quite a lot about when it comes to diversity and inclusion is really, in a way, the coronavirus pandemic. We know that it's highlighted a lot of public health disparities among racial groups in this country, not only with race, but with class as well. And there's one quote that you've said in the past that's really stuck out to me. It's that racism is a public health crisis. Would love to hear you elaborate on that more and kind of explain how it applies today as we're starting to get over the coronavirus pandemic.
Well, Julia, first of all, it's good to be with you and the Hill and as part of this very important conversation. I think the COVID pandemic was one of the perfect examples of what we talk about when we talk about the impacts, the generational impacts of racism in America, as well as the inequities that have persisted throughout, particularly healthcare. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Equity basically says, as we formulate policy and approach to any challenge, we must give duly consideration to everyone who's impacted and really where they are in terms of how that policy or program will impact them. Not everyone starts from the same position. And so you can't just do cookie cutter approach or draconian blunt force object across an issue. When it came to COVID-19, we were implementing health measures, masking, stay at home, without really thinking about the inequities that exist. Not everybody had a decent, affordable home to go to. Not everybody had a job where they can spend time at home away, maybe Zoom in and do the work. We had to go back and really think about how we service and help those who weren't at the same place where they can go home comfortably and work from home or be off from work and still be paid and be able to take care of their bills. Came time for the vaccine. Why were African Americans and Latinos less trusting of the vaccine? You got to go back to the 1940s and 50s and generationally, how the fear of vaccines and the healthcare industry has gone through. What I say is racism, a public health crisis. What I mean by that is that it is deep within us, deep within society. And we just got to keep peeling back the layers until we get through the symptom of a challenge so that we can help make society make it healthier. And it's going to take all of us to have those very deep, hard, painful conversations to get to it and not just mask it over with policy and legislation.
Right. And speaking of policy and legislation, one term we've been hearing a lot here in Washington, really across the country in political circles, is President Biden's Build Back Better program. And we've seen that this plan would obviously help Americans get over this other side of COVID and help maybe in some ways bridge these gaps when it comes to inequality, whether that's financially or maybe a more social and economic context. Wanted to hear from your end what you think it means to build back better and how you're implementing this right now in Denver.
Yeah, we said it here in Denver that as we recover, because it absolutely dismantled our economic system here in Denver. Denver is the fifth city in the country, or at least was identified as fifth in the country as being most impacted by the pandemic. That is measured on our economic impact. A lot of people lost jobs. A lot of businesses went belly up or were stalled and irreparably harmed. That's because we were flying at such an economic clip in Denver. We were one of the top economies in the country at the time. What that means is, as we build back better, let's be more thoughtful and equitable in our thinking. Let's think about those who are not able to just immediately jump on the economic rocket and ride comfortably to their dream and realize that as we implement new programs and new efforts to recover economically, we must be considerate of those who may not be in a position to take full advantage of it. What does childcare mean to someone? Make sure it's affordable and accessible to people, right? Transportation and making sure people have access to mobility. Things that we didn't think about when this economy took off 10 years ago. Things that we have a chance now to think about as we build back better.
Right, right. And another topic we hear quite a bit in the national conversation is, unfortunately, this idea of, the idea of voter suppression
Yeah.
and the fight against voter suppression. And being in Washington and on the East Coast, you hear quite a bit about it happening in the US Southeast. Talk about your efforts to combat voter suppression in Denver and how the issue has really played out in Denver.
Yeah, we have seen, to your point, Julia, more than 400 bills introduced across this country in 49 states that create an expansive, restrictive standards or barriers to access to voting. And as children and beneficiaries of those who were in the civil rights movement, who gave their lives, quite frankly, placed themselves in imminent danger so that we could have this right, we don't have the audacity to sit back and let it happen in Georgia, Texas, South Carolina, wherever it's happening. We must act. And so what we've been trying to do in Denver is really to raise the awareness that what's happening in Georgia is not okay, even to those of us in Colorado, the side of the blue state where we're not a threat. But it's going to happen. Someone's going to introduce the bill. We've been working to raise awareness, to educate people, to make the laws in Denver so that there is more expansive voting opportunities in the city of Denver. And just to make sure that people know what's happening and that we send a very clear message that we should not be rolling back access to the ballot box and being more restrictive. We ought to be expanding access. So two things. Last year, 2 years ago, our clerk recorder came to me. He's our chief election officer in the city of Denver and said, I need more money to create more drop-off locations for all mail ballots in the city of Denver. Well, absolutely. We funded him. Well, in some states like Houston, they're passing restrictive laws in Texas where they go from, and we know how large of a landmass the city of Houston is, they go from 24 drop-off locations to 1 for such a massive population. That simply can't happen. So I've been proud to join with Mayor Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago. And next week actually, we are hosting a national nonpartisan conversation on voter rights in Denver, where we're convening elected officials, local and state and federal government, and civic organizations and business leaders to talk about how we push back on these efforts around the country.
Right, right. And it seems that some of the benefits, or one of the major benefits of having access to a ballot box, is having voters be inspired to perhaps someday run for office or get involved in government, because they see themselves obviously having a direct hand in politics and in public policy at that level. Talk about how important it is in City Hall and at all levels of government to have a diverse set of voices, and the efforts you're putting forth to make sure City Hall in Denver is inclusive.
I appreciate that. It's extremely important. First and foremost, I come from an activist background. I mean, I was a CEO of the Urban League, one of the greatest civil rights movements of our time, of our country. And I was proud. Still one of the greatest times in my life as a young man. And I came to understand how people standing up, people pushing for a valuable cause can affect change, and how important it is. And it's also equally important for us as elected officials in positions of power, and to create that change, listen and understand where people are. One of the things that we did in Denver to extend and to really promote the value of listening and being equitable is to create a new office. And it's called the Mayor's Office of Social Equity and Inclusion. I just appointed the city's very first director of equity in the city of Denver, or equity officer, I should say. And Dr. Aisha Rousseau will lead this office and further what we've already started in Denver. And that is to make sure that our 11,000 employees are aware of their own implicit bias, are aware of equity and the value of equity, and how we set our budgets, how we administer our policies, and how we administer services to our customers. Not every customer who walks through the door is the same. And we must be prepared and understand what our own biases may be and how it affects our change. So we're training our employees. We are embedding equity as a value in everything that we do. I just finished a week long of budget presentations in front of City Council with my agencies. Every agency talked and started their presentation with, here is our statement and our efforts around equity within this budget. Every agency. And that's what the expectation is going forward.
Right. Well, we'll definitely be watching to see what Denver City Hall does under your administration going forward. And we're really looking forward to your conversation and at the summit with Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Mayor Hancock, thank you so much for joining us today.
Julia, thank you for having me.
Thank you.